Hello and welcome to Auto Moments. Now, if you watched our recent video on the Bricklin SV-1, you may have been wondering, where did they get all those wonderful photos they used? Well, some of them at least came from these vintage Bricklin brochures, and so I figured, why don't we take a brochure tour through them and take a closer look. Now, let's start with this one because I'm not 100% sure, but I believe this is the older of the two. And it's interesting, Bricklin production was spread out kind of over 3 years. 1974 was the first year where they had AMC engines. 1975 was the second year where they had Ford engines. And then after the company went bankrupt, there was a limited run of cars built in 1976 using the leftover parts. And I have not been able to find a brochure yet that advertises the AMC engine. This one says 1975 and has the Ford engine listed. So let's take a look here. We have this lovely sort of desert at night photograph here. And at this point in time in his life, Malcolm was very into the American Southwest kind of thing. He had a home in Arizona. Some of the company's headquarters were there in Arizona. And you can see these press photos look like they were taken in the desert somewhere. And they really are quite pretty. And it does kind of go along with the whole, what was in vogue in the 1970s at that point. You know, I guess the sort of American Southwest was going through a little bit of a revival in terms of pop culture. So there we see a beautiful green Bricklin and then a personal letter from Malcolm here. You know, kind of standard car company PR speak, you know, saying that the Bricklin is a vehicle that was as safe as we could possibly make it. A vehicle that would provide people with greater protection from the havoc of our highways. A car that had to be beautiful to look at, durable, and easy to maintain. And, you know, that was addressing some of the things people were concerned about in the 70s. As I mentioned in the longer video, you know, automotive safety was on people's minds at the time. There were a lot of traffic fatalities. And they were pretty gruesome because safety features weren't really that advanced at that point in time. And then also durability and stuff, there's definitely this feeling that like American cars were not durable, they did not last, that sort of thing. So the Bricklin was trying to capitalize on that and say like, hey, we've got a solution to your problems. I am proud to have my name on this car and I hope you in turn will be proud to own one. So pretty standard stuff. Once again, some more gorgeous American Southwest photos here. A great picture here, the back end of the car, the Gull wing doors. You know, the first page here talks a lot about safety. So the first production car that is truly worthy of being called a safety vehicle contains revolutionary new safety features and engineering designs not found in most mass-produced automobiles. And that was a bit of an exaggeration, but not untrue. If you watch the video, you know, we talk about the bumpers and how those were a big deal. You know, they were more than double the federal government standard, that sort of thing. And then Gull wing doors, even though they look cool, they were also marketed as a safety feature. It says, besides adding to the visual appeal of the car, Gull wing doors are also quite practical, as well as safer than ordinary doors. They open up and out of the way of traffic, thereby minimizing the possibility of accidents from oncoming vehicle traffic or even bicycles. And this is something I think all Gull wing door cars face a certain amount of misunderstanding about. People see those doors and they say, oh, well, you're going to scrape the car next to you. You can't park anywhere because when the door opens, you'll hit the car beside you. But if you notice, the hinge is so far toward the middle of the car that it actually requires less clearance when you open a Gull wing door than it does a standard, just regularly hinged automobile door. So they do look a little scary going up, like you might scratch the car next to you in a Kmart parking lot, but in reality, supposedly they are safer, at least for that. Now, in the case of an accident where, you know, you roll the car over on its roof, I don't know how I'd feel about that. And the Bricklin doors, as you saw in the video, they do have a safety pin you can pull. So if the system to lift the doors doesn't work, you can open the door manually. And of course, I mentioned in the video, the original doors were electro-hydraulic, meaning they had an electric motor that pumped oil that then powered a hydraulic cylinder. But in very many of the cars afterward, they were retrofitted with a compressed air system, which is what the car I drove had. And that's generally considered to be a lot more reliable and a lot safer and a lot faster too, so you don't have to wait quite so long for the doors to open. Next, we're suddenly in the forest, and then this is the weird thing. This is a safety red Bricklin, and it looks kind of orange on camera, but if you look in the brochure later, that's what a safety orange car is supposed to look like. If you can see that, this is safety red, and so the one I drove was safety red, even though it looked kind of orange. So, beauty that's more than skin deep. Aesthetically, the shape of the Bricklin speaks for itself. But from a practical standpoint, the makeup of the body deserves special mention. And then it goes on to talk about, oh, well, you know, it's space-age acrylic reinforced with fiberglass. It's stronger than steel. It won't rust. It won't corrode, blah, blah, blah. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, quality was on the American public's mind at the time. And there was this general feeling that American cars were rust buckets. And so one way to counteract that is to build an entire car out of plastic. So at least the body won't rust. I mean, it still had steel in other parts of the car, like, you know, the chassis and stuff. But in general, you know, you won't get rust holes around the fenders if your body isn't made of steel. And in terms of the styling here, one thing that Herb Grass is no longer alive, but one thing that he said on the design was that he didn't want any extra chrome bits. You notice there's no chrome trim on here anywhere. It looks like a car from the 1980s. And if you look at other 70s cars, I mean, they had tons of unnecessary chrome, you know, rub strips and hood ornaments and grills and window frames and all that. And I think that's kind of what makes the car look so good and what makes it look so futuristic. I mean, this thing would fit in side by side with a C4 Corvette, no problem. And it's, you know, a full, what, 5, 7, 8 years older than one. I always thought from a dead-on front shot, the car does have a little bit of a vacuum cleaner kind of nose to it, which, I mean, if you like vacuum cleaners, that's not a bad thing. Now we're talking about performance, and of course there's the 351 cubic inch V8, that's the Ford Windsor engine. And, you know, we talk about, there's no hard numbers here. We don't see horsepower anywhere. We don't see, it says, enough power to enable you to accelerate quickly into fast-moving traffic flow of today's highways. But nowhere do we see, oh, it's a 0 to 60 time of, you know, 6 seconds, 8 seconds, 10 seconds. You know, we have no idea. You know, and we see some of the other colors here. This gorgeous picture with the geyser in the background makes me wonder, did they just sit there and wait for the geyser to blow, or is that, I guess that's probably not a real geyser. That looks like a lake with a fountain in it. I don't really know. I mean, Malcolm was a millionaire. Who knows? That could be at his ranch in Arizona. Anyways, though, so some cool pictures here of the different colors. This is the Safety Suntan, which I guess for a brief period of time it was called Safety Ochre instead, which sounds kind of like a Bob Ross thing. Oh, we're going to get some Safety Ochre here and paint on our happy little Bricklin. Which, I mean, this whole scene could be a Bob Ross painting, actually. But anyways, so this color is definitely very 70s, and even Malcolm admitted he doesn't particularly care for it, but I think it's also one of the more rare colors in terms of, you know, what you're going to see if you go to a Bricklin show. So, you know, as things usually go with automobiles, the color that nobody wants now becomes rare and collectible because nobody wanted it. All right, now we're talking about the interior, and this is what sticks out to me. Look at that. That is a Bricklin with a 4-speed manual, which theoretically was not available for 1975. So they must have taken these photos prior to 1975, back when the AMC engine was still an option, because you see there's a car with an automatic transmission, but sure enough, there's a car with a stick shift, and we know that was an AMC only option. And of course now, not only are the AMC Bricklins more powerful, they also, 100 or so of them have manual transmissions, which make, if you have a manual transmission AMC powered Bricklin, that is generally considered the best of the best, I think, for collectibles. So, you know, that's pretty cool. Like most old cars, a manual transmission usually adds to the value. The bucket seats, I found them kind of uncomfortable. They're an interesting design, and the suede-like material is supposed to, you know, keep you from sliding around, which, I mean, I guess it does. They don't really have contours on the sides, so I guess, you know, the fact that the material holds you in place is a benefit. Certainly better than, you know, a vinyl bench or anything like that. But I didn't find them particularly comfortable. Some other cool things, we talk about, you know, the warning lights and the easy to read gauges, all that stuff. I mean, you know, the interior is very different from typical 70s cars in that it's more driver oriented, but I didn't find the interior in real life to be anything special. It's neat, but it's not like, oh my gosh, this is amazing or anything like that. Of course, I mentioned in the video cigarette lighters, and that's something they even talk about in the brochure here. It says, Bricklin comes standard with a full complement of popular accessories, everything but a cigarette lighter, because we don't think smoking while driving is safe, and we don't want you dropping a hot cigarette in your lap and driving our beautiful car into a tree. That is just so 1970s in my mind. That's sort of like smarmy sarcasm, you know, self-awareness. You know, you would never read something like that in a 1960s brochure or a 1950s brochure. That's just a very 70s kind of line, which I've heard multiple versions on why it didn't have a cigarette lighter. I mean, everything from they didn't want to spend the money to put one in there to, you know, Herb Grass didn't smoke, so he didn't put one in there, to Malcolm didn't smoke, so he didn't want one in there. It could be a variety of things, but of course, in typical Bricklin fashion, whatever the reason, they definitely turned it into a marketing opportunity. And so now we move over to specifications, and of course we went over these in the video, but I mean, you can get everything, you know, the displacement, compression ratio, carburetor, exhaust, no catalytic converter, which that was another reason, I think, why they chose the Ford 351, or at least I've heard this, I can't confirm this, but I've heard that one of the reasons they chose the 351 V8 was because they could get away emissions-wise without a catalytic converter, that Ford had some kind of exemption for the engine or something like that. And of course that saved Bricklin money not having to engineer and put a catalytic converter in the car, whereas most other American cars for 1975 were required to have one. You know, automatic transmission only, all, you know, your other statistics here. And then here's your body colors: red, safety green, safety suntan, safety white, and safety orange. So there's your colors. You know, the marketing team really worked hard on coming up with fancy names for the colors there. And then, as I mentioned, Arizona before, right there, you know, Bricklin Vehicle Corporation in Scottsdale, Arizona. That was their HQ at the time. And then, of course, we end, and how appropriate we end with that beautiful photo. And as we look at our second brochure, it's the same photo. Slightly different, you know, cropping there, but a very pretty picture nonetheless. So let's take a look at our second brochure, and like I said, I think this one is later because it doesn't have any photos of a manual transmission in it, and it once again has the Ford V8 engine listed as the only engine choice. But let's take a look here. As you see, it recycles a lot of the same pictures, which, you know, is what a lot of car companies do if the car doesn't change from year to year. You know, talking again about space age acrylic reinforced with fiberglass, the Ford 351 V8 engine with carburetor, top cruising speed well above the speed limit. Once again, no hard numbers. We're just gonna say, well, it's faster than the speed limit. Well, most cars are, no matter what. Anyways, standard equipment. You know, talk about brakes and tires and gull-wing doors, beauty and style. You know, backup system of warning lights, the gauges you see there. Unlike any other mass-produced car in the world, Bricklin comes standard with a full complement of popular accessories, everything but a cigarette lighter. Once again, the same joke. Actually, a lot of the advertising copy in this brochure is almost identical to the other brochure, as are most of the photos. And a nice, cool thing you get here is a full-size poster. So, you know, if you're a teenage kid going to a car dealership and collecting brochures like I did when, well, I still do that, and I'm an adult. But anyways, you know, a great picture here of the Bricklin. This would be something you'd want to hang on your bedroom wall right next to, you know, Farrah Fawcett or whoever it is that people liked back then. And that's it for this brochure. It's relatively short. Obviously, we've got our specs here. One thing that I really like that the other brochure didn't have is this cutaway diagram of the car. So, you know, we see the roll cage and the gull-wing doors and the fuel tank and the bumper height reinforced side rails and the energy-absorbing bumper. So it's kind of neat to see a breakdown of the safety features from sort of a skeleton view. Once again, there's our body colors. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So that is the two Bricklin brochures that I have. There may be more out there. Like I said, if there's one for 1974 that has the specs for the AMC engine, that would be really cool. But I've not been able to find such a thing. So anyways, thanks for coming on this brochure tour with me. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out the full video we did on the entire history of the SV-1, including an interview with Malcolm Bricklin himself. It really is a fascinating car and a fascinating company. So that's all for now. Be sure to stay tuned for more videos, and in the meantime, Thanks for watching.